It started with a knock on my cabin door and a weirdly polite smile from Karen, the self-declared queen of the HOA, even though my lake cabin sits well outside their neighborhood borders. She said it was a courtesy visit, but within 5 minutes, she was already talking about rezoning, beautification projects, and how my cabin would be a perfect retreat for visiting executives. I thought she was just being nosy again. I had no idea she was setting something up behind my back. A week later, I came back to find a fancy SUV parked in my driveway, complete strangers lounging on my porch, and Karen waving around a clipboard, like she owned the place. That's when she dropped the bomb. This property's been temporarily reassigned for corporate wellness purposes. Her husband's boss was inside, sipping my coffee. I wasn't just shocked, me was furious. Karen had overstepped before, but this was bold. She claimed it was approved through the HOA and that I should have responded to the notice. Problem is, I never got one, 'cause she never sent it. She thought I'd just roll over, but she didn't know I kept everything, every deed, every survey, every legal document tanned. I wasn't about to let this slide, so while she was busy bragging at a community brunch, I made a few calls. Let's just say when her husband's boss came into work Monday morning, he was met with a brand new fence, stretching straight through their corporate front lawn. See. What Karen didn't realize is that while I may look like just another quiet cabin owner, I've dealt with land disputes before, and I document everything. The lake property has been in my family for over 40 years. It's not under HOA authority, and I've got a thick folder of legal proof to back that up. But Karen, being Karen, thought she could play power games by using her husband's connections to push me out. Turns out, her husband works in middle management at a local real estate company, and his boss, who now had his feet up on my porch railing, apparently believed this was some sort of vacation bonus. Karen sold the story that it was all approved, that I had agreed to let the cabin be used short-term while they prepped the area for community expansion. Total lie. There was no development, no approval, no agreement. Just her arrogance and a borrowed printer to fake some papers. And here's where it gets more twisted. I found out through a neighbor that Karen had been boasting about securing the cabin as a gift to impress her husband's boss, someone she was clearly trying to win favor with. It wasn't just about control anymore. It was about climbing the ladder, so I did some digging. I traced the real estate firm's headquarters, found the lot lines, pulled every permit on file, and made one phone call to a fencing contractor I trusted. Karen thought she'd claimed my cabin. She had no idea I was about to stake mine loudly. The fencing crew showed up first thing Monday morning, just as planned. I handed them the layout I'd marked up, precise measurements based on old boundary lines that had never been disputed until Karen got creative. Their job was simple: fence off my cabin and extend the boundary in the most legal, noticeable way possible, right through the company's reserved parking spots. Meanwhile, I wasn't the only one who was noticing Karen's overreach. A few other property owners near the lake had their own stories, smaller things at first, like Karen questioning their building materials or calling in phony violations about boats being left docked too long. But when word got around about what happened to my cabin, people started comparing notes. It was clear this wasn't a one-time stunt. She had a pattern of pushing limits, using her made-up authority to manipulate situations in her favor. One neighbor mentioned that Karen had recently started hosting HOA meetings at her house, even though she wasn't officially elected for any leadership role. She had somehow convinced a few board members that she was interim chair during a transition period, none of which was ever documented. It was all smoke and mirrors, and no one had bothered to check as the fence posts went up and stretched toward that shiny glass head office. My phone lit up. First, a call from the office receptionist. Then another from Karen's husband. Then, finally, an unknown number that would change everything. I didn't answer. Not yet. Let them sweat. By mid-morning, the fencing crew had already made it halfway. Across the office property, each post drove a message deeper. This land isn't yours. And I was standing right there, clipboard in hand. Just like Karen had stood in front of my cabin, pretending she had authority. The calls kept coming, but I didn't pick up. I wanted everything documented, every step, every confused employee. Walking out to find their cars boxed in, every question that echoed around the lot, like, who approved this? Inside the building, someone finally came out to an actual executive, not just Karen's boss. He looked at the fence, then at me, then back at the growing crowd of curious employees gathering by the windows. I calmly handed him a folder with copies of my deed, boundary records, and a summary of what Karen had done. No threats, no yelling, just facts. His face changed. His face changed. You could see the realization hit him this wasn't some angry neighbor ranting over a small patch of land. This was legal, deliberate, and backed with evidence. That's when Karen pulled up, his tires screeching, hopping out of her car with papers, flapping in her hand. She tried to push through the crew, yelling that I was making a huge mistake, but nobody moved. Not the workers, not the office staff, definitely not me. The moment she saw the executive holding my documents and not her voice cracked. She started to say something, but her husband pulled in right behind her. He didn't look surprised. He looked worried. Karen's husband didn't even get out of the car at first. He just sat there, watching everything unfold. Karen, on the other hand, was scrambling. She shoved the papers into the executive's hands, insisting that I had forged documents, that I was harassing a corporate partner, and that she had every right to use the cabin under a community agreement. But here's the twist: while she was throwing her usual noise, the executive turned the papers over and asked one simple question. Why does this signature have your maiden name, Karen? The silence hit like a punch. Her eyes widened for a second before she tried to explain, but it didn't land. Because right then, her husband stepped out of the car, walked past her without a word, and handed the executive another folder, this one containing internal emails and messages. Turns out, Kana had been using her husband's work account too. Send authorization letters about the cabin to higher-ups, posing as part of a property partnership deal that didn't exist. She'd even photoshopped email headers and copied parts of old land agreements to make it look legit. The executive's tone shifted. No more confusion. No more polite questions. Now it was all business. Karen, suddenly quiet, turned to her husband. You weren't supposed to say anything, she whispered. But he didn't even look at her. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about a cabin anymore. This was about fraud, deception, a case, and a cover-up that had gone way deeper than I imagined. The moment Karen realized her husband had flipped the script, her whole demeanor changed. She stood frozen, eyes darting between him and the executive, trying to piece together a way out. But there wasn't one. The executive calmly looked over the evidence, then asked me if I'd be willing to stay and speak with their legal team. I said yes, of course. Within 10 minutes, their in-house counsel arrived. They'd already started digging into the emails her husband submitted. And it didn't take long for them to confirm it. Karen had impersonated an internal employee, sent false corporate communication, and initiated an unauthorized use of private property. That's when the company did something I didn't expect. They apologized. Not just a quick sorry, but a full formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing on their end. They even offered to cover all legal fees if I wished to press charges. Karen stood there the whole time, trembling, still holding that crumpled clipboard like it could save her. Just when I thought it was all wrapping up, her husband spoke again. He said quietly, "You should also check the cabin's Wi-Fi logs." Everyone turned toward him. He looked exhausted, like a man who had finally dropped a heavy burden. She installed a remote access system, She's been monitoring visitors. Recording footage I didn't know until last week. The legal rep froze. The executive's expression darkened. And Karen. She dropped the clipboard. That fence I built didn't just protect my land, it exposed everything. The fallout happened. Fast. Within days, the company launched a full internal review. Karen's husband was cleared of wrongdoing, and Karen herself, she vanished from the neighborhood overnight. No more surprise inspections. No more HOA flyers on doors. No more power tripping. At community events, her name was quietly removed from every unofficial committee she had forced herself into. The board held an emergency meeting to tighten policies and distance themselves from her actions. As for the cabin, I installed a proper security system, one I controlled. The remote access setup she had secretly wired in was taken down, and all footage was wiped clean after it was reviewed. I wasn't interested in dragging it out through court, but I did make sure she'd never touch my land again. The company formally issued a letter clearing me of any false claims and confirming the cabin's boundaries. Neighbors started reaching out to. Some just wanted to apologize for not speaking up sooner.